Tech Twice Weekly, episode 39. Welcome to Tech Twice Weekly for January 19th, 2015. This is your source for the most important technology news stories and discussion every Monday and Thursday evening. My name is Ben White, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend Eric Fee. How you doing tonight, man?
What's up, dude? Doing great.
Did you have the day off for Martin Luther King Day?
Yes, sir. I'm lucky.
Oh, nice. I thought only banks and government employees got the day off.
I am another one of those.
Very nice. So, do anything interesting with your MLK, or just enjoy the fact you didn't have to go to work?
That's it. I just slept in.
I think we could all appreciate a nice day to sleep in. Yeah, I slept in, but that just meant I didn't go to the gym this morning. So, as you may or may not know, today is Martin Luther King Day in the U.S., so many businesses are closed in observance of the holiday, but that also means the news cycle is a little bit slow today. So while tonight's show isn't quite as news packed as some, there is still some news to cover, and I made sure to find us some good headlines. So let's go ahead and jump into them. You may have heard people talk this week about the death of Google Glass, but according to the story by Engadget, these rumors may be greatly exaggerated. In fact, Google is moving Project Glass out of the Google X Labs and into Google proper. Google X Labs is intended to be a research and development arm for Google, so it only makes sense for Google to move a project out of their X Labs and into the main Google company if they're planning on keeping it around. Along with this move, Google has placed Google Glass under Nest co-founder Tony Fadell. So, while Google has taken Project Glass Explorer Edition off the market for now, I fully expect to see it return as a proper consumer-ready device sometime soon. Do you think the whole world has already moved on to 64-bit OSs, leaving 32-bit in the dust? Well, if so, you were wrong. Tweaktown is reporting that the head of Microsoft's Windows Insider program has announced on Twitter that Windows 10 will be released in both 64-bit and 32-bit versions. This news comes in spite of the fact that 92.8% of all new Windows computers are running 64-bit operating systems. And while it may seem strange to continue supporting an architecture that is limited to just 4 gigabytes of addressable user memory, Tweaktown's Paul Alcorn suspects that most of this release has to do less with a large 32-bit user base needing a newer version of the OS, and more to do with avoiding the negative press associated with dropping support for the aging architecture. Now, you, especially from a programming perspective, may have a little more insight on this. Does it make sense to you to offer a 32-bit version of Windows 10?
I don't know. I don't think there's really a technical reason. For a long time now, processors have supported 64-bit operations, and I don't really think that there are many folks installing this on machines that don't support it. But I will say that the common misconception that 32-bit 32-bit software or 32-bit machines can't use more than 4 gigabytes of RAM. The truth is that with a 32-bit operating system, your each program, and that includes the operating system itself, will not be able to use more than 4 gigabytes each. So you're limited on very large applications or games who can't hog more than 4 gigabytes for that specific address space. But you can have 2 gigabytes allocated there. You can have another uh, program with 2 gigabytes allocated. You can have another program with 4 gigabytes allocated, and all of a sudden you're using 8 gigabytes. That's completely normal and available under a 32-bit system. So although I think it's mostly a business decision and really has nothing to do with the technical reasons, it'll be interesting to see if even less computers are running 32-bit in a few years for Windows 11 or whatever.
Well, and one thing that the article brings up, and I wasn't actually aware that the 4 gigabytes was per application. One thing the article mentions is the fact that some systems now you'll have a 3 gigabyte video card. So the video card itself will have 3 gigabytes of onboard memory. And if an application were trying to address the video memory and system memory, would that also run into the 32-bit 4 gig limitation?
I don't think so. I don't know that much about that though.
Okay, because that was one of the things that the article brought up is that putting a 3 gigabyte video card into a 32-bit system is basically sacrificing some of the RAM that's available on the video card.
Well, if you have a 3 gigabyte video card and support for that in your computer, it's unlikely that you'll be running a 32-bit OS in the first place.
I suppose that's true. Realistically, I mean, you'd have to almost intentionally cross a relatively high-end graphics card with a relatively low-end system at this point to come up to that situation. All right, well, moving on. Even if you're unfamiliar with the Chinese company Xiaomi, you might still be interested in one of their newest products, the Mi Note. Android Central is reporting on the announcement of an Android media streaming box about the size of a typical phone charger. The Mi Note includes a quad-core Cortex A7 processor running at 1.3 GHz, 1 GB of system RAM, 4 gigabytes of internal storage, dual-band Wi-Fi connectivity, HDMI 1.4 connectivity supporting 1080p 3D video output, Bluetooth, of course, and DTS 2.0 audio, as well as Dolby Digital Plus support. Now, all of that hardware runs under Android 4.4.2 KitKat, and the housing includes a built-in plug, allowing the whole thing to be plugged directly into a wall socket. Xiaomi plans to bring the device to market for 199 won, about 30 US dollars, on January 20th, tomorrow, in China. They have not yet announced release dates or intentions for other markets. Now, I know we've talked about microcomputers in the past, like Intel's Compute Stick they've announced at CES that goes directly into an HDMI port. What do you think about Xiaomi's take on the microcomputer?
I think that I have one around here somewhere, one of those little Android stick deals. I think it's a cool idea. I don't know if it's better than USB powered, um, because those you can often plug into your TV's diagnostics port or something. Also, I was a little bit surprised to see that it only has 1 gigabyte of RAM. I was hoping that we're getting past that point and we're moving on to Android devices with more memory, but apparently not so.
Yeah, I think that's, to me, that's the one drawback to the whole thing, because even, yeah, I hesitate to say simple, but a device as simple as a smartphone, 1 gigabyte of RAM on a smartphone tends to be a drawback. It really limits the amount of applications you can run. Google Earth, for example, really struggles on low RAM Android devices. So I kind of wonder what limitations this would put on the functionality you can get out of the device.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe I just don't know. Yeah, I'd have to try it to know. But the
Do you know
little,
how much RAM is in the one you have tucked away somewhere?
I'm pretty sure it's 1 gigabyte as well, and it's
And
pretty slow.
okay. Is it new enough to be running KitKat, or did it come out earlier than that?
I've had it for a while now. I did get an update, but I'm not sure what it's running at now. I have to pull it out. I mean, it may have another update for all I know.
I mean, I guess the fact that you have it tucked away somewhere kind of talks to the how much functionality you found a use for.
Yeah, when I got my Chromecast, that thing kind of just went away. It was a fun toy. It was cheap, but at this point, it's like I don't have any practical use for it.
I think that's the way a lot of people feel is the Chromecast has replaced much of the use cases for these micro Android devices.
Yeah. One other note: the that currency is pronounced yuan, Chinese yuan.
Okay, let's sidetrack for a minute. How many currencies does China have? Because there's yen.
That's not Chinese.
Okay, maybe this is the problem. Maybe the public education system has failed me in any proper education of anything outside the U.S.
It has. Yen is Japanese.
Okay, so there's my fundamental first problem. So China uses the yuan.
Right.
Okay.
In certain countries, it's their currency can be very interesting. Also, for
Because
example, in Cambodia, they have a currency called the rial, but it's worth almost nothing. And most trading is done on the U.S. dollar, and there are actually ATMs there that spit out dollars, so you can go get like American money out of ATMs. And then if you get change for less than $1, they will give you like real to make up for it.
interesting. And so, okay, Chinese yuan. Why is it abbreviated RMB?
Mm. Oh, the renminbi. No, that's one I don't know how to pronounce.
Sounds like a fair pronunciation to me.
I'm pretty sure it's pronounced renminbi, but I could be wrong. That's another. That's a PRC. That's the modern PRC currency.
Okay. Well, there's our global history lesson for the day. I'm glad I have you on to straighten me out in all things not Western. So sad. Okay, well, enough of my own embarrassment of my lack of cultural knowledge. Let's move on to the next story. The Register is reporting on Twitter complying with the Turkish government's court order requiring the social network to cease reporting on military police raids on spooks trucks. This came after Turkish Twitter users began posting to the service about claims that the trucks contained weapons for extremists to attack the Syrian regime, which is led by Turkish President Bashar al-Assad. The Turkish government has maintained their stance on the trucks only containing humanitarian aid. A similar court order was also issued to Facebook and Google as well, who also complied with a request to remove posts from accounts that linked to accusatory documents. In case the news last week on Elon Musk's efforts to build a reusable rocket engine weren't enough for you, the Next Web passes along news from Bloomberg that Elon Musk is also looking into bringing the internet into outer space, or to be more realistic, to put a network of satellites into orbit, allowing packets to be bounced around orbit before reaching their destination. As if that weren't enough, he also envisions using this network of internet-connected satellites to support connecting Mars to the internet as well. The satellites themselves will be designed by SpaceX to fly in low Earth orbit to help eliminate communications lag. What do you think about this idea? I think it actually makes some sense, regardless of how practical it might be.
Well, it's going to be necessary once we discover the Prothean archives on Mars. We're going to need it to get the information back and forth and to connect to the galactic extranet. That was
Very true. Very true.
Mass Effect fans will understand that one. Or better yet, this is the building of the sub-Ethernet.
And to think, I thought Silk Road was working on developing the sub-Ethernet.
Sub-Ethernet is the galactic communication in Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yes. Now, the real question, though, about this story is what do you think about the idea of SpaceX, a private corporation, wanting to get in to develop something like this, which traditionally would be in the realm of NASA and a government-backed public service or public works project?
Well, they're not getting any money for that. NASA's being choked.
Well, that's my point, though, is just, what are your thoughts on the fact that in order to get a project like this off the ground, it's going to take private enterprise, SpaceX, because NASA simply doesn't do that anymore?
Well, I think that's sucky, I guess, from many standpoints, but also the current situation is we really don't need that kind of communication. I think it'd be nice, I guess, to be able to set up more remote connections to the internet here on Earth, being able to do so in space, being able to have having your web service running on a satellite, whatever. But at the same time, we also don't have a problem with communicating as it is. I mean, it might make the space station a little bit easier to talk to, but Elon Musk, of course, is a interesting individual who has a lot of very interesting ideas, and it's kind of his shtick, make an interesting idea, figure something out, say he's going to do it, make a bunch of publicity, and then maybe it'll happen sometime, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be useful, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be open so other people can launch their own satellites to integrate. Maybe it won't. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, if we ever get to a point in civilization where we need to communicate over an IP network in space, then I'm sure that someone will come up with it. I don't think that's really a hard thing to do specifically. I think it's just something that we don't need right now, so it's not done.
That seems fair. I mean, it'll definitely be curious to see where this goes if it ends up being something that Elon Musk and SpaceX actually put money into and put into space. I mean, even he recognizes this is a significantly long-term project, even compared to their rocket development. All right. Well, that brings us to our last story. I know I said I was done covering news on the Sony hack and the interview in general, but the International Business Times UK is reporting on John McAfee claiming to not only know who is behind the Sony hack, but also to have been in touch with them. If you're somehow unfamiliar, John McAfee is the namesake to the McAfee antivirus software, which is currently owned by Intel. And while that normally would give some people credibility, John McAfee is also the same guy who was wanted by Belize authorities for questioning in the murder of his next-door neighbor back in September of last year. So while I'm not saying I don't believe him, I am saying I need a little more evidence than just his word. Although, according to the International Business Times UK, that is all he is willing to give to back up his claim, given, as he said, quote, "I don't want to name them. That would make me a narc," end quote. What do you think about this? Out of the blue, John McAfee comes forward and says, "Oh, by the way, I know who did the Sony hack. It wasn't North Korea." but don't worry about it.
It is many people's opinion, and in which I share, that John McAfee is insane.
you The more I see him interact with the public at large, the more I'm inclined to believe you and agree with you. But the real question, though, is he Courtney Love crazy, or is he Gary Busey crazy?
Hey, Gary Busey's got a good excuse. He's had a very bad traumatic brain injury from a motorcycle accident.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that guy was right even before the accident.
That is also true, but I can't tell you.
And maybe Courtney Love's a bad description. I really should pair it between Gary Busey and Dragon Blood. Totally forgetting his name. Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen crazy or Gary Busey crazy?
Anyone who doesn't know, Gary Busey used to be a motorcycle rider and an active anti-helmet law activist, which is not something I necessarily disagree with. Um, I think that if you want to wear a helmet, great, but if you don't wear a helmet and you crash your motorcycle like Gary Busey did, you end up with brain damage. So I don't really need a law telling me to wear a helmet because I kind of want to keep it all intact up there as much as possible.
Is he still supporting that cause?
No, he's very pro helmet now for obvious reasons.
Hmm. It's
Yeah, I
funny
mean,
how that works.
if all it takes is a traumatic brain injury and making you, crazy to make believers out of people, it's unfortunate, and I feel bad that that had to happen to the guy. Usually, I have
It's
people learn their lessons before they crack their skull open on the pavement.
it's true, but he has made a career profession out of being crazy, brain injury or no.
Yep.
So I feel bad. I would never want to wish a brain injury upon anybody, but for someone with a brain injury, he's doing quite well for himself.
Indeed.
All right, well, that moves us into our tech toys you wish you could buy. And starting us off is a story from Engadget about a new e-motorbike from Bramo that was recently purchased by Polaris. You're probably familiar with Polaris for making ATVs, quads, those sort of off-road. Um, I don't want to say sport utility because that's the wrong word, but just off-road toys. Um, and this new bike is kind of interesting. Um, what's even more interesting is that this actually has a local tie. Um, the employees at Bramos Talent, which is an Oregon-based manufacturing company where these two e-bikes are currently being built, um, was recently bought by Polaris, and even though the manufacturing sounds like it's going to get shut down, the R&D department is going to be kept up. Did you get a chance to look at this article and see the bike?
Yeah. Just to set the story straight, Bramo has been around for a while. Bramo has been making the Impulse and Inertia, which are commonly known e-bikes, and they're have been selling them for a while. A lot of people own them. It's a lot of good stories for the most part. Bramo is an Oregon company that used to make electric bikes here. They got bought out by Polaris, and now Polaris is shutting down their manufacturing here, but they're keeping the R&D and probably if they have any patents and other information, and they'll probably ship it out and have new stuff built at the Polaris's already existing manufacturing stations that are probably cheaper to run. It's actually a little sad. I think that it's unfortunate that Bramo wasn't able to stay afloat. Electric bikes are expensive right now, and they don't really offer much over gasoline motorcycles. Regular gasoline motorcycles already get extremely good fuel economy. They're very Most motorcycles are cheap to own, cheap to insure, and cheap to maintain. Used motorcycles are also can be very cheap to purchase. They don't have as many parts, and there's less to go wrong. I mean, my little Honda is as old as I am, and it gets 60 or better, 60 to 80 miles to the gallon. It's only got a 2 gallon tank, but I can ride on that tank to and from work for a couple of weeks, and then still have a lot of fun and still drive it like I stole it or ride it like I stole it. And um, e-bikes just have not they haven't kept up. They've been significantly more expensive. They don't really offer the same kind of benefits like you would with an electric car, the fuel savings, um, as because motorcycle fuel is just doesn't really cost much to drive one. Um, right now, e-bikes are really heavy because the batteries weigh much more than the standard gasoline engine components. Um, so there's and the range. You have a weight to maintain. You have to keep your weight down so the motorcycle is easy to handle and easy to ride. But by doing so, it removes batteries, which lowers your range. So your range gets kind of in the wimpy factor of like 80 to 100 miles for a Bramo e-bike on a charge. It's not very far. Um, where you could do that on a gasoline motorcycle and with 2 gallons of gas, and especially with gas being $2 a gallon now, makes it even cheaper to ride a gas bike. And the e-bikes have been around 10 grand here and there for the lower end ones, and so it's hard to justify buying one. And it's sad that they're basically going out of business. They are heavily discounting their bikes to just sell them at all, and it looks like Polaris came and bought them out and made them all rich.
Well, sort of. I mean, Polaris had been an investor in Bramo for a while, but they didn't own it outright. And for what it's worth, they say that they're going to begin manufacturing electric motorcycles in the second half of 2015 out of Spirit Lake, Iowa. But I don't know. I mean, like you said, all the issues with electric motorbikes out there. Do you think they're simply doing this because they have the parts and now the patents, or are they doing this because it's actually a market they're going to double up, reinvest in, and maybe put something out there that actually has some potential?
Who knows? I mean, it all right now. Electric cars, plug-in hybrid cars, electric bikes, electric bicycles, electric scooters, all these high-powered machinery, they're kind of being screwed by current battery technology. Batteries weigh way too much. They don't hold a dense enough charge. And so having an electric car with range is extremely expensive. And even when you do it, they are also extremely heavy. Now, with electric cars, it's not as big of a deal because um, you don't lose out on the weight as much. But with a motorcycle, weight is a big factor in handling and ease of riding. Whereas with a heavy car, yeah, there are cars out there right now that are extremely heavy that people drive every day, and they can tell you that they're great. Um, I mean, Ford, Yukon XLs weigh like 8,000 pounds. They weigh like 2.5 times as much as a passenger car, but obviously they do fine. They don't get great fuel economy, but there are plenty of cars that aren't that heavy that get poor fuel economy as well. Um, and they drive fine, but a really heavy motorcycle does not ride very well. Um,
If they could come up with something that got over the weight and thus probably the distance limitations, would you actually have any interest in one?
oh, totally. I have an interest in one now. It's just not financially viable.
Sure.
I'd love to have an electric scooter. Would be really fun for little city jaunts and stuff. Going to visit my parents or hopping down the grocery store or just going around in circles like I just don't care.
Well, like the one we covered a couple of weeks ago from CES that wants to debut with a network of basically rentable batteries. I could if something like that came into Portland, I think that could be really successful
Oh yeah, well that removes some of the distance problems, and the scooters are going to have much shorter distances anyways.
because they're
Um,
lighter by definition.
they're lighter, they're much smaller. They don't have the central area for a battery pack like the Bramo does or whatever. They have to stick under your seat and whatnot. But still, like yeah, that stuff's great. And electric scooters have been around for a very long time, and they've only been getting better with the technology that's been coming out lately. But yeah, I'd love to have one. It's just not. I can't afford a new scooter or motorcycle regardless if it's electric or not. So
All right. Well, the next tech toy here is one that I particularly thought of you when I saw this product. And Digital Trends is covering a tiny keyboard that lets you touch type on a phone that doesn't have a keyboard. And what this offers, it's called the Text Blade. And it is a small keyboard using real keys in a semi ergonomical fashion. You can pair it to your smartphone or tablet, and it runs for $99. It's about the size of a pack of gum, and they claim you can type up to 100 words per minute on it. What do you think about this? Does this seem like something you would ever actually use? I know you're a diehard for a physical keyboard on a smart device.
I like it. I think it's really cool. There are plenty of keyboards that are of similar size when they're folded out, though, or maybe they're a little bit bigger. But so I don't really see what the big deal is. I like it, and $100 isn't uh, isn't a complete deal breaker. But at the same time, it's like I already have a Bluetooth keyboard, and it's about the size of a tablet. But if I'm using a tablet, then what's the difference? It packs to about the same size, so I think it looks really cool though. It has like as a space bar with the battery and all the important stuff, and apparently it clips together magnetically, which is kind of fun.
What I think that I like about it a lot, and this seems kind of unique for most of the Bluetooth keyboards I've seen out there, is it's split to allow a little more ergonomic design to it. Because most of these Bluetooth keyboards I see tend to be almost candy bar format.
Yeah, totally. I think it's cool.
I can't quite decide if it's something I would ever actually use, though.
No, I don't think so either. I
It's one
like
of those
the
products that I love, but I can't see myself using.
yeah. I have a Bluetooth keyboard that is decent, and I've only used it. I used it when I had a tablet, but I only had a tablet for um, 6 months or something before I got rid of it. And I love physical keyboards, but if I have to put the phone down and then connect this thing and then go through a bunch of hoops, it's like I like the physical keyboards on phones for sending text messages. Like when I'm walking around downtown or something or getting lunch, not for sitting down and typing a novel.
Right, right. And especially now with your Chromebook, you'd much rather pull that out if you're going to do some extended typing.
Yeah, totally. And it has access to uh, all the you know textual services you'll need, Google Docs or your email or Evernote or whatever.
You know what I could really see this pairing quite well with? A iPad or a Surface Pro. If you were to pair this with like a Microsoft Surface to have a full keyboard to go with the small size tablet, so in the once in a while situation where you're looking to do some long form typing, I can see that being a really nice use case for this.
Well, except for the fact the Surface Pro comes with like the the click type keyboard for $100 or whatever.
Right, but I don't know. There's some circumstances where that design isn't going to be practical to have a laptop's worth of space available. I'm thinking like on airplanes maybe or somewhere like that.
You have enough room for it on an airplane.
I don't know. I think that is the one circumstance I could see myself buying something like this because in space restricted areas that I might want a full keyboard.
Well, if you're thinking about buying a keyboard for your smartphone, I was looking at a uh, a Bluetooth keyboard that Logitech makes. It has like a little area to balance like a phone or a tablet in. So it has a thin area in it that you can prop a tablet or phone in, so it props up. Um, it also has a little dial for selecting which device to connect to. So you can pair it to up to three devices and then connect it with whichever one you have with you by the little dial.
That's clever.
So you could have your phone paired to it. So if you were, you know, sitting around in a coffee shop, you just wanted to chat with someone, or you could have it connected to your tablet, so you could sit down and, pound out some notes from a meeting or something into Evernote, and then you could have a Surface or a tablet PC type deal going on. You could prop it down and have actual keyboard access to like your applications and all that. Yeah, look it up. It's on Logitech's website. I think it's pretty useful, although it's not the same. It's not the tiny form factor. It's just keyboard form factor.
Interesting.
Different device, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I like the keyboard. I just don't think that it'd be that useful. It solves a niche use case, I think, between the standard Bluetooth keyboard and like when it's built into the device. So, I think that there are people out there whose lifestyles meet that, where they sit down for a couple minutes at a time, and they want to smack together some writing. But I don't think that the market share is too big on that exact circumstance.
Yeah. All right. Well, that brings us into our discussions to wrap up the show. Now, the first discussion topic here I wanted to run past you. Have you heard of the service Hackers List?
No, sir.
Mashable is covering this new service that just launched that is basically the Craigslist for hackers. And what I mean by that is actually kind of reverse, really. Anyone can go onto the service and post a request. Like an example, you want, let's see, what's one example from the article here? There's an article to change my final grade with a university. And then hackers, quote unquote, and I really hate using that word, but that is what they're calling them with the service, go in and make bids. They suggest how they would accomplish the task and make a bid for how much they would want to fulfill the request. And then once enough bids are received, the person who made the original request gets to choose a hacker to take on the task. And once they make their first payment to the hacker would then theoretically go do whatever they agreed to go do. And while the website's terms of service clearly state that the site is not to be used for illegal activities, most of the topics posted to the service seem to be illegal activities. So I don't really know what to make of that. What do you think of this whole concept?
I'm thinking I should go on, place a bid to hack the service itself, and then get all of the hacker and user information, and then blackmail all of them.
Well, there theoretically are system administrators overwatching everything. They might remove your post.
True, but how dumb do you have to be to realize that fact the first time you see it? Yet you're the kind of person who has the skills to do so. It's like it seems like playing with fire to me, from a law enforcement point of view and from the ire of the capable point of view. It's like I don't really think that's a smart idea. And it reminds me of the Lizard Squad thing that I read about the other day. Um, Apparently, Lizard Squad which is a known hacking group who've done stupid things, allowed people to pay them money to use their botnet or whatever to send denial of service attacks on whoever the client wanted to, and that tool was compromised, and whoever did so got all the information for all the clients who had paid to use Lizard Squad's DDoS tool.
Hmm.
So, yeah, the same thing will happen here, except not only will the hackers be exposed, but so will the people who posted the ads. And yeah, just playing with fire, man. This is the kind of place I would just not go.
Well, I mean, there's some, I don't know about legitimacy, but you could say there's some reason to preserve the site, to not just hack it off the face of the internet, because it does provide a marketplace for hackers to sell their wares, sell their services. Um,
Yeah.
Although I don't know what the marketplace for that really is. I mean, drug dealers have to sell their wares, and they seem to do quite well without having a public-facing website.
Well, not only that, but many legitimate security consultants have no problem finding work for themselves or making a lot of money. Um, and I mean, if you have these kinds of skills, and you want to make money on them, that's what you do. You become a security consultant of sorts, and you help other people secure their systems. Uh, you help corporations keep their data intact. You get paid handsomely, and you get to use those skills, for testing and improving. I mean, adding to business places, not hacking iPhones or fucking with people's uh, Facebook accounts or other immoral and degrading uh, odd jobs.
And to me, what this whole thing sounds like is somebody had a really great idea. Somebody sat around and said, you know, sometimes when we want to do some penetration testing, it's really hard to find someone who we don't already know their methods and techniques to come in and really hit the system hard to make sure that it's hardened. Let's put up a website where we can let people put out bids, and then hackers can come and get paid money to do penetration testing and security testing. But they just didn't think about all the implications of what they were offering.
Maybe they did and don't care.
It's possible. We'll see how long this remains active. Because you're right, though. This seems like it'd be ripe, especially considering there's money involved, for somebody to man in the middle attack some of these transactions to get credit card data, PayPal logins, any number of things.
Yep.
I mean, even if you're paying in Bitcoin, all you have to do is intercept the Bitcoin payment, considering it's going through a middleman, and you could redirect that transfer of funds technically.
Well, I'm not gonna get all, you know, technical on it. But I will say that yeah, playing with fire, man.
Yeah. Well, and our last discussion topic here, and this is one I know you've mentioned before as this was going on, is the FCC Spectrum auctions. They just recently had a final round of auctions for the Advanced Wireless Services 3, or I guess it's still in its final round, but it has brought in nearly $45 billion for the U.S. Treasury, and that's more than twice what any previous FCC auction has brought in. Um, what do you think about these auctions in general? The idea of selling off this spectrum to the highest bidder?
Isn't that normal?
I suppose. I mean, the according to the article here from GigaOM, the record sums are being paid for high band spectrum at 1.7 gigahertz, 2.1 gigahertz, um, and this goes in the face of a lot of traditional thinking that low band spectrum, like 1 gigahertz, is really where it's at. So it's interesting that these higher bands are what the money's going for. Um, I don't know how much you're into radio and bandwidth at all. I mean, is this something you know a whole lot about?
Not that much. I think it's interesting that they they bid it all. I think that rental and rent and pay access is a little bit sounds more like a better way to manage their the access to the frequency. But
That's interesting. Yeah, because I mean, I guess the traditional American way is to buy something outright and you own it. And I mean, technically, you're buying a license to use it through the FCC. But that's a really good point. I mean, the idea of leasing spectrum rather than owning spectrum seems like it'd be a lot more revenue driven for the FCC.
yeah,
I mean, I don't know the technical nuances to know why that is or is not an option,
well, neither do I. I'm layman speculation.
but it's kind of curious to me just to see where this goes, like what these frequencies are going to end up being used for. Because in the first Spectrum auction that really gathered public attention was when I think Verizon it was bought a bunch of Spectrum after the digital transition for TV, and that's the one where Google notoriously got in and got the FCC to agree to add a requirement for open access to the frequency. And now, despite the FCC putting that regulation in, Verizon still hasn't actually opened up access to that frequency to anyone else. They're still using it privately and not allowing others access to it. So I really wonder how much the FCC cares if they're not even willing to put oversight into requirements and restrictions they put into place here.
Yeah, it's a good question.
But I don't know. I mean, honestly, all of the Spectrum stuff is it's a bit of a mystery. I don't know how a lot of it works. I just hope some of it's used to be beneficial to me in some way. And by me, I mean consumer, not me personally. But there's a lot of areas out there that could use better cell phone signals and all sorts of other things that these bandwidth frequencies could be used for. But time will tell where it goes and what it gets done. Um, but I know there's a lot of new technology coming down the pipe. I mean, 5G is already in discussion, even though most of the big carriers aren't really fully done with their 4G rollout yet, even though 4G is a bankrupt term. But I guess I'm trying to say they're LTE networks and trying to get voice over LTE to be a thing.
Not only that, but even having enough bandwidth, enough allocated bandwidth over the course of a month to make it useful. I mean, it's great that it's easier to stream, high def YouTube videos, but I can only do that a couple times before I start seeing the uh, the bandwidth accumulate and run out my monthly allotment, which will happen a lot less now that I got that 10 gigabyte stash thing coming from T-Mobile.
That's right. That finally went into effect for you, huh?
Yep, got an email today, and I went to check on their website, and I got 10 gigabytes of storage that I can use whenever. And
That's awesome.
not only that, but uh, my my unused data allotment should start rolling over into my stash soon. So I will probably be gaining in allowable data usage and not losing it. But either way,
And I really like that T-Mobile's implementation of this means you're storing your, because they don't limit the amount of data, pure data you can have, you're really getting to store your high speed data that you've paid for and don't use, compared to AT&T's crippled implementation of data rollover, where you're storing data, but they don't differentiate between high speed and low speed data. So it just is what it is.
right. And now that they have this whole thing going on, I might try and see if I can finagle myself a SIM card for my Chromebook.
Yeah, why not share that data pool?
Exactly. I mean, if it works like that, then it'd be excellent because I don't use my Chromebook on LTE very often, or not LTE, on data very often. I usually use it on Wi-Fi, but it'd be great to have that availability, especially with that 10 gigabytes of data I have just lying around. I might as well try and at least use up the data I get every month.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, without a whole lot of news to talk about, we somehow have managed to stretch the show into almost an hour of discussion. I'm pretty proud of that.
Happens sometimes.
I guess there was actually some news to talk about after all.
Well, once you get me talking, you can't shut me up.
All right. Well, let's wrap things up for tonight. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled schedule on Thursday. Anything you want to share before we get out of here?
Hopefully, I will have a new mic setup that should increase my quality by then. So, looking forward to giving a test on Thursday if I get lucky enough to get the hardware before then.
Awesome, awesome. Oh, and this Sunday, new episode of Pro Slackers After Hours will be in the pipe, right?
I hope so. This Sunday we will have Nick back hopefully, and we will talk about something he is interested in, which is uh, those really small houses. What are they called?
Like minimalistic houses or just small size dwellings?
Yeah, there's a term for them. It's escaping me. But alternative housing and RV living and tiny houses. That's what they're called, tiny houses. He's interested in that. I am very interested in alternative housing as well. So it should be a pretty fun episode. You got to read up, Ben.
I do, I do. I've got some homework to do. And if anybody's interested in checking that out, what's the website for it?
It's proslackers.com/after hours. We have you can stream them from there. Um, the the shows are hosted on Internet Archives. You can also go download them. And I keep a feed updated there too. So if you have your favorite podcast reader, you could point at that RSS file and get them when they come. We typically record every other week on Sunday nights.
There we go. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again for joining me for another episode, man. I appreciate it.
Well, I will be here for the foreseeable future.
We are rapidly approaching the big 5-0.
Oh, it's 50th episode. Yeah, I was like, what are you talking about? I've got many years before I turn 50. Many.
No, I just can't believe that we have done this nearly 50 times.
Well, more if you count all the test episodes and all that.
Yeah, but nobody wants to listen to those.
I don't even want to listen to those. Can we just forget about them now?
Right? But please, if you haven't subscribed, do so at techtwiceweekly.com. We've got RSS feeds up there. The show's on iTunes, Stitcher, Blueberry. And if we're not in your favorite podcast directory, let me know on Twitter at techtwiceweekly or email us feedback@techtwiceweekly. There's also an email form on the website if you don't have access to email and just want to drop us a quick line. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get us out of here. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you Thursday.